Propaganda, what is it really? What is it in today's times? I don't really know.
Hi, and welcome back. In this module, we will explore everything there is to know about propaganda. Just like Irina just asked, I think it's best to start with an explanation on what propaganda is and then also what it is not. Let's have a look.
The definition of propaganda is intentional and strategic messages that are designed to reach a large audience. When you and I are in conversation and we're talking about controversial social and political issues, we're engaged in the act of persuasion. And persuasion is not the same as propaganda, right? So I think it's important to distinguish between propaganda and persuasion because persuasion is rooted in interpersonal relationships, right? And propaganda is rooted in this reaching of a large mass audience, right? But I think it's important not to conflate persuasion and propaganda. Persuasion is a great big category and propaganda is like a little subset of it within that. So propaganda is a really big idea, and it's premised on the phenomenon that we form our understandings of the world and of our own behavior through the media messages that circulate in our culture.
Okay, so propaganda isn't the same thing as persuasion, but where can we find propaganda?
The propaganda can be found in journalism. It can be found in entertainment. It can be found in advertising. It can be found in government and political expression. It can be found in entertainment, and it can be found in activism. So when we cast an eye toward identifying propaganda, those 6 places are important places to look. If we only look in the newspaper or we only look online for propaganda, we will be missing the forms of propaganda that happen in education, in entertainment, and in activism.
Propaganda can be found everywhere. Does everybody perceive propaganda in the same way?
And so that's why we often say that propaganda is in the eye of the beholder. You know, when you read something that you really deeply believe in and agree with, you won't see it as propaganda. But if you encounter a message that completely goes against your existing beliefs that you find deeply offensive and troubling, you'll say, that is propaganda. Well, so that's why we say propaganda is in the eye of the beholder. It doesn't have so much to do with the intention of the communicator, because truthfully, we can never know the intention of the communicator, you know? We can make an inference, we can guess, but we can only make sense of messages from our own point of view, right? And so that's why it's important to be aware of the interpretations that you're making of media messages, and sometimes even calling attention to the ones that you find most believable and most credible, reflecting on why you find those messages believable and trustworthy.
It's difficult to recognize propaganda that corresponds with your own beliefs. Are there any techniques that are often used in propaganda that can help us to recognize it?
Propaganda has some identifiable techniques that make it sometimes easy to spot. The first technique is that propaganda activates strong emotions. Propaganda appeals to our emotions and often tries to suppress or bypass our logical, critical thinking impulses. Second thing that propaganda does is that propaganda appeals to people's deepest hopes, fears, and dreams. So propaganda is intentionally designed communication that is designed to activate the deepest, your deepest values, your deepest beliefs, and your deepest hopes for yourself and your family and your community. That's why propaganda is so effective, because propaganda won't work if it doesn't target the stuff that matters to you. The third technique that propaganda uses is to simplify information. And in fact, much effective communication aims to simplify information. But when you simplify information, you leave a lot out, right? And so that's why it's sometimes good for us to learn how to spot propaganda by noticing what's not said, what's not included, what's omitted. So simplifying information is a very effective way to make effective propaganda, because the human mind, we want fast, we want stuff quick and fast and now and immediate. And propaganda has a bias toward presenting stuff that's quick and fast and immediate, and necessarily oversimplifies the complex reality of the world we live in. The final technique for recognizing propaganda is propaganda that attacks opponents. And of course, this is the most dangerous and potentially, really harmful technique of propaganda. But cultivating either or thinking is another kind of simplification, and attacking opponents and casting blame and creating and cultivating that us versus them mentality is a propaganda technique, which is actually why when we're trying to engage in genuine critical thinking, we try to avoid debate formats themselves, which often create that either or dialectic. It's a very effective communication strategy to create us versus them, good versus bad. But actually, the world is so much more complicated than that, that whenever we see a dialectic, a binary opposition being set up, we will want to understand that that can sometimes be a tool of propaganda. So attacking opponents is a technique that you can spot everywhere in our culture, everywhere around the world. But it is really, history has shown us how incredibly harmful it can be to human life and well-being and functioning. Propaganda's original meaning meant to broadcast, to spread widely a message designed to enlighten and inspire. So throughout the 20th century and now into the 21st century, the meanings of propaganda have changed in relation to changes in society, culture, and technology. In the 20th century, when communication technologies were expensive and required a lot of capital, a lot of hardware, we thought of propaganda as coming at us, right? Coming at us from journalism, coming at us from political elites, coming at us from entertainment media, the publishing industry, and so forth. But since the rise of the internet and social media, where now everyone is an author, everyone is a creator of media, we now understand that most propaganda is not spread by pushing down messages from institutions like the government and the publishing industries and political leaders or political parties. Most propaganda is spread virally in peer-to-peer networks, because every time you share a message, you are contributing to the viral spread of propaganda. Now, I personally engaged in that all the time because I want to share messages that reflect my values, my beliefs, and my political goals for having a more democratic society, a more just and equal society, right? Coming as I am, as the daughter or granddaughter of an immigrant, I spread propaganda that reflects my values. But I'm doing that with conscious awareness, because the virality of propaganda can be used in harmful and unintentionally dangerous ways. Sometimes some people click like or share horrible propaganda, but they think it's funny. And they didn't think very much that they were contributing to the spread of propaganda. They just thought it was funny. So virality is a relatively new feature of propaganda that puts more responsibility on us as consumers and creators to be aware that every decision we make about liking and sharing can contribute to the spread of propaganda.
Virality is a new factor of propaganda spreading. Is there anything we should be aware of regarding the online spreading of propaganda?
Now, personalized propaganda through Facebook and through Google is another form of propaganda that we're not even aware of, right? Because we're fed customized propaganda that targets our own deepest values and interests and is designed intentionally to bypass our critical thinking by appealing to us and our individual interests. Personalized propaganda through algorithms is now a dominant way that persuasion happens in political campaigns. And the only way we're going to solve that problem is if we get the money out of elections. If we limit campaign spending.
Okay, so personalized propaganda can easily influence us because we don't necessarily think critically about the content we see on our social media feed. Maybe an example of powerful propaganda on social media can clarify this.
Got it. So propaganda in memes is popular because it features all four propaganda devices. It activates strong emotion, generally to make us laugh, right? It simplifies information in an extreme way with just a short phrase and an image. It appeals to human values and hopes and dreams because it often provides a framing that is relatable, right? It connects to our lived experience. And then sometimes memes also create good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. And by attacking opponents, memes can be very effective. But if you think about it, one of the things that's exciting and interesting about the democratic potential of memes is that memes can be easily created by anyone. So that's one of the reasons why memes are so powerful, is that they are deeply situational and contextual because they're created by ordinary people at a particular moment in time in response to a particular milieu. They can actually be very powerful forms of propaganda when people persuading people when they least expect it.
We now know what propaganda is, which techniques are used in it, and where we can be confronted with it. In our next video, we'll talk about whether or not propaganda is a harmful thing. What do you think?